Good morning, friends, and welcome back to Trans India. Real people, real emotions. We have always known road transport to be a very unorganized segment, and if we were to see the plight of trucks in the past, the less said, the better. Therefore, it came as a surprise when I saw a few Parsi transporters being unorganized and having poorly maintained vehicles are definitely not the traits of a Parsi. So, how are they managing being part of this industry? Trans India caught up with the second generation at BD Dhalla Transport, Byram Dhalla, at his Churchgate office in Mumbai. BD Dhalla Transport has been in the business for over 50 years now, but the journey of Byram has been quite different. He is quite the transporter, but with a twist. He is a travel enthusiast plus a driving freak. Byram has driven across the globe, including taking a road trip from London to India. He has immense knowledge of vehicles and has been advising OEMs on various aspects of a truck, which the OEMs have been taking very seriously. So let's know more about the journey of this very outspoken Parsi transporter, Byram Dhalla. So Byram, to start with, when did you enter the transport industry?
Straight out of management school in 1989. Um, I I did my summer training with Tata Motors. At that time, it was called Telco, of course, and this was in an era where MBAs were considered hot property and a relatively unique um, educational qualification for that phase. And they, at the end of my phase, my summer training with them, they offered me a job back when I graduated. I never really seriously considered joining them as an employee, but I did give a shot at joining the Tata Administrative Services, which I believe then would be the only place I would have liked to have worked at. It didn't go through all the way. I made it through 2 or 3 of the rounds of interview, and eventually I got dropped out, possibly because of the awareness that they had that I was part of a family that had a family business. So as soon as I got that rejection from Tata Administrative Services, or TAS as they're called, I decided to join the family business. I'd also worked briefly at 2 or 3 points of time in the years leading up to my graduation and my post-graduation. So it was something that excited me. I've always been passionate about cars, trucks, driving, and that sort of thing. So to an extent, it sounds cliched, but it was in my blood.
So was the family business your first choice?
I would think so. Yes, it was my first choice when I joined. I did not join it under duress from anyone in the family, and they were quite open and resigned to the fact that I might join corporate life, especially when I did an MBA. So it was a known decision that I made myself to join the business.
Byram, back in time when you joined the transport business as an MBA, there were very few people who actually joined the transport industry after doing an MBA. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I would think so, because when I look at my peers and colleagues, there's barely any in my age band now in their late 50s who are in the business that I know of. They're probably those that are 6 to 8 to 10, and of course much younger than that, 10 years younger than I am, who probably joined in the 90s and thereafter, when things became more organized and it became a more attractive option for them to look at being employed in.
So what was your first reaction like after joining the transport business, especially coming from an MBA background?
Knowing how little of the MBA I could deploy in my business, and that I think was the first realization that this was nuts and bolts sort of business that I had to familiarize myself with and learn to work with. I'd done an MBA with finance, but there was very little of that I could apply directly into the business. It's more about the overall background of the education that I had got up to that point of time that I carried into the business in terms of working with people, how to deal with the early days. I did get a few slaps on the wrist even from clients and senior clients in the earlier years, which on looking back, I think were great things that happened to my personal development as a business person and as a human being both, So I had these sort of, I wouldn't call them mentors, but people I did interact with a lot who were significantly older than I was. I am. At that point of time, they were probably 20 or 25 years older, and they've been in business or running in corporate life for several years, and they did teach me a lot of things that I should do better and could do better, and I should not do and should not look at, building on or in developing those skills.
How was the transport business back?
At least our business was 100% local work. So we are a Bombay-based company, and I think everything of our business was within the city of Bombay. That's how the business had developed in the years leading up to the time I joined. The fleet strength itself was a fraction of what it is now, and we used at that time a lot of trucks which were not bought new. So there was, I wouldn't say a culture, but there was a practice of using pre-owned trucks or buying. In the very earlier years, my dad tells me that they use military disposal trucks, and then they refit them with diesel engines. A lot of trucks ran on petrol till the early 70s, and then the Suez crisis took place and fuel prices rocketed up. And that's when my dad tells me he went running around trying to replace each and every of those petrol engines with diesel engines. So these were crude trucks. The trucks were crude. I'd say business was a lot simpler, but a lot more difficult as well, because communication was difficult. Once the driver left your base, you were reliant on him connecting back with you. It's not that you could pick up your phone or connect with him in any way. So those were the challenges. It was all cash driven in the sense that every transaction was in cash, whether it be the payment of tolls, payment for fuel, payment for the driver's expenses. So that was, of course, when we can look back on it today and say that that's what made it difficult, but at that time it was the only way we knew how business was done. I even remember that just before mobile phones came into use in India, which I think was in 93 or 94, we were in an era when we used something called pagers. And we've given a lot of our staff and drivers pagers, and then we try and take it to the next level by giving coded messages. So 001 meant call immediately, so the poor guy would have to stop and then go to the nearest phone booth and give us a call back. And there were, of course, the PCOs, as we call them, and the STD phone booths and so on. And I also remember that when one of our clients suggested that we be involved with their business, in one of our legacy clients was setting up a factory in Aurangabad. And it was a big decision for my family, for my father and I, about whether we should expand and explore, spread our services to Aurangabad. Is 350 kilometers down the road, but at that time it seemed like you were flying from here to Nagaland, So that's where the business was at then. Trucks were relatively, I wouldn't say crude, definitely crude also. Safety was unheard of, and we still thought we owned Rolls Royces. So when we were buying new Tata trucks then, we still looked on them with stars in our eyes. Like, wow, what a fabulous piece of machinery this is, But they'd still be guzzling 1 liter of oil for roughly every 1,000 kilometers on the road. The engines would last maybe 150,000 kilometers at best. So it was very routine for us to have to send our trucks in for an engine overhaul at 110,000 kilometers back then. Probably tire technology wasn't where it is, so tire breakdowns or tire failures would be more prevalent than they are today. Needless to say, the roads are nowhere near what they are today. So that's something else we dealt with. So in the earlier years, in fact, the years just before I did my master's in business, I spent a lot of time traveling on the highways, because not so much so as a learning tool for my business, but because of my passion for driving and trucks and being out on the highways. So I used to travel with them and go largely within 200 or 300 kilometers of Bombay, but I'd spend 2 and 3 days at a time at a stretch on the trucks. So I'd eat with them, sleep with them, and sometimes even drive with them. I could see what was actually the situation now. And when I drive down those same roads, at least what's left of the same roads, many of the roads have completely changed now. I mean, they're not even on the same stretch of road. Example being the Bombay-Pune highway, for example, is now the expressway, so you don't even drive down the old Bombay-Pune highway. I think I've last driven down that road once probably in the last 7 or 8 years. I haven't had a chance to go down the road, but then it brings back memories of what the road was like, what the dhabas were like, what the truck stops, what the fuel stops were like. So it was very, very crude, rudimentary and basic at that time, but we still made it work. And I think that was a phase when transporters had a good run, because there were so many entry barriers to running a reasonably successful transport business that those who could surmount those barriers were doing reasonably well. Right now, it's definitely become a more level playing field. In the 35 years that I've been running the business or in the business, it's definitely become more widespread.
How was the transport business back then when you joined? What was the structure like?
BD Dhalla, largely 5 business verticals within transportation. There is the legacy business or the original business, which I would broadly call haulage, which is regular sort of trucks that run with general cargo across the country. We do a lot in refrigerated transport. We've also been working in the oil field services. That's a business that I started off with in the early 90s, and it involved running trucks and trailers across the country, especially into the areas of the country where the oil fields exist. So typically remote area operation. It could be in the remote northeast of India. It could be Kakinada Basin, a lot of activity there. And of course the deserts in Rajasthan and the Barmer area. So very challenging to that extent. Then we've also been doing for the last 8 or 9 years a lot in high-speed trucking, which is express trucking for e-com players, e-com businesses. So that's something that's come up in the recent past, and I think we've grown most over there in relation to the growth in the other areas of our business.
We will continue our interaction with Byram after this very short break. You are watching Trans India, real people, real emotions.
क्या आप जानते हैं एक ट्रक ओनर के लिए सबसे मुश्किल काम क्या होता है? अपने ट्रक के लिए रिटर्न लोड खोजना।
पर अब ट्रैकिट ट्रांसपोर्ट मार्केट ने इसे आसान कर दिया है।
वो कैसे?
ट्रांसपोर्ट मार्केट टाइम पर ट्रैकिट ऐप में आए हुए लोड पर अपना बेस्ट रेट भेजें, माल की डिलीवरी की डेट और टाइम सिलेक्ट करें और सबमिट कर दें, और ऑर्डर कंफर्म होने पर व्हीकल असाइन करें। है ना आसान? तो देर किस बात की? प्ले स्टोर ऐप पर टाइप करें TRAKET ट्रैकिट और डाउनलोड करें ट्रैकिट ऐप।
Welcome back to Trans India, real people, real emotions. We are in conversation with the second generation at BD Dhalla Transport, Byram Dhalla. Byram, a while ago we spoke about how cell phones were a novelty item back then, and now here we are. How much has IT helped your business with all these changes?
Massively. In a word, massively. There was a time, and I think fortunately we got into our ultra long haul routes. When I say ultra long haul, we were running routes out of here to Guwahati and then beyond Guwahati and into the other states of the northeast. So whether it was Mizoram, Manipur, Nagaland, Arunachal, and of course Tripura, where the oil fields are spread across in that. So we were running trucks from here into Guwahati and then from the base of our client, which was in the Duliajan Guwahati belt, into these other states. And I cannot even think about what business would be like had I done these same routes 20 years earlier. I mean, just to enumerate, we'd be spending about ₹1 lakh on fuel alone to get the truck from here into Guwahati and beyond. And if we were to do this business in the 90s, prior to information technology, digitalization, we'd be having to give the drivers ₹100,000 or ₹200,000 up front. You never know what's going to happen, how he's going to spend it, whether he's going to be there at the end of the trip, whether he's going to abandon the truck and run off home with the bounty. We'd not know that. So I shudder to think what business would have been like then. But today with technology, we've been running track and trace solutions, that is vehicle tracking solutions, for several years, long before I think they became in vogue, if I may use that phrase, with most of the transport industry. So I'd say about 15 or 16 years that we've been already using these solutions. So it's gone way beyond just track and trace. It monitors largely driver behavior. And now with the newer generation of trucks that we run, it tells us a lot about the truck's behavior as well. So telematics tells us about how the truck is performing, whether it be just on speed, engine hours, engine temperature, that preemptively can tell you about issues that may crop up that you need to address before they escalate into a breakdown. So that aside, then how we handle the drivers. So money moving seamlessly, I mean, we don't step out of the office. The team in the office is distributing money for fuel, for tolls, of course, is now not in the hands of the drivers. So that's become very easy, of course, and we're waiting for the next level of tech, which the Honorable Minister of Road Transport tells us is around the corner, when satellites will pick up where your truck is and directly calculate tolls. So it'll eliminate toll stops on the way. So to that extent, definitely your documents are online. With digitalization and IT today, we don't even have to visit the RTOs to renew documents, which was a huge bottleneck till 2 or 3 years ago, at least where we operate. Reliance on agents who would be, skimming off the top of every single transaction you do, whether it be paying road tax, whether it be renewing a national permit for our trucks. And I often used to ask myself and others that when the government allows us for several years to pay our income tax online, pay our GST online, why are we being forced to go physically to pay fees like national permit fees or road taxes? It's not that that's a negotiable or a discretionary amount that's being charged. So happy to say that part of it has gone out of the hand of agents. We can sit in the office and do it. We can transmit the document online to our drivers wherever he be in India, whether it's insurance, taxes, permits, all that is taken care of. Having said that, sometimes it does trip up. We do have pockets of local arrogance, if I may use the word, where local officers say that we're above whatever the law states. This is the local legislation. We've recently had 2 or 3 pretty nasty, time-consuming experiences where local authorities have said that it's all well and good that the national law says that a document on M-Parivahan or DigiLocker or whatever is valid documents for this sort of for evidence of ownership, for example. Your RC books are now, your registration certificate is now available online. But they say, no, I'm sorry, bring us the original document. So we actually had a vehicle waiting 2,000 kilometers away, and we had to spend a huge amount of money to fly down a simple registration card. And we tried through whatever channels we had available on the ground there to explain to the officer, but he was king over there. He is a king in his little fiefdom and insisted on this. So it's still sometimes not being used as well as it could. And I sometimes feel these are the true enemies of the country. When they're holding up economy, then progress and movement, it's just working against. And then we do see what's going on the roads. We had the national logistics policy declared, where India's cost of logistics is roughly twice as much as that of comparable economies, and the government wants to drop that cost to half. We do feel that a lot of this you'll go a long way towards that halfway mark if this whole level of facilitation, corruption is somehow eliminated and brought out of the system. You have brand new trucks being stopped, absolutely brand new on their very first trip, 100%, 110% compliant with all the laws of the land, and yet they're being arbitrarily stopped. Fine for this, fine for that. There is a state in India where they have a separate fine, a higher fine for air-conditioned trucks, which are mandated by a client who says that no, because we want your drivers who operate for our businesses to be more comfortable, safer, more alert. It's ticking off many of the boxes that the ministries want to address. We want your drivers to have air-conditioned trucks. It's commonly available with all the 5 OEMs in India today. But the system there, the local system says, no, this tax is going to be, they call it tax, is going to be 1.5 times as high as the tax otherwise. In the first place, there's no need to tax that truck because it's absolutely compliant and there's no violation of any law, but they do take the tax and then they put in the kicker of the 1.5% because you have an air-conditioned truck, So coming back to the IT part of it, it's changed everything about the way we do. Most of us do not need to step out of our offices to run the business efficiently, whether it be managing payouts, salaries, tolls, fuel. It's all done digitally, remotely, and we have access to all the data. We know how our trucks are performing. We know how our drivers are performing. It can all be rated. It can all be sorted very, very easily and effortlessly. There's a lot of ERP that's available today that makes it incredibly easy to do. There's a lot more to be done, without doubt, but this has gone a long, long way into making this part of the activity a lot easier.
Byram, we've been sitting together for a couple of hours now, and your phone hasn't gone off even once. Do you find a difference from when you joined the business back then and now? Back then your phone would constantly be ringing with the drivers calling and other calls coming in, and today you're sitting in peace without much paper on your table as well. Is that really a difference?
I'm not sure whether it's more of a personal business style or working style, but you're probably seeing it with others also. So I think that era when we proved that we were efficient or productive by having to go through stacks of paper every day has passed. Just recently, the small anecdote was that a friend of mine wanted me to join him at short notice for lunch 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I sent him a photograph of my desk, which at that point of time happened to have 5 or 6 stacks of paper, and this was on a group chat. Another guy says, he just sent me a one-line message saying, digitize, digitize, digitize. So he was expecting that we'd be completely paper-free, and I do think the next generation, even in my business, my son is trying to run the business without paperwork, but we have to have the checks and balances in place. I'm still of the generation that believes that it's important to show that you are looking at papers that flow in and out and around the office, more from a model point of view than a control point of view. So that's something I'm trying to move away from, so maybe that will reduce over time even further. Personally, I don't need to take more than non-client calls. I would say not more than 3 or 4 a day at the most. I don't allow the communication with the drivers. This is something I personally have enjoyed over the years, because when they come in, we do interact with them when we onboard them. Our business isn't so large that we don't get an opportunity, or I don't see the need to interact with them. So this is something that's more of a personal thing that we enjoy doing. We have a very robust onboarding procedure. So after the first level of interaction has been done, he's cleared his paperwork, they come in, then they meet me, and I have an assessment. With the years of experience, you can very, very rapidly suss out what the attitude of that person is. You can't sit in your office and judge what his driving skills are, but that you have to assume will get improved with training or with experience, one of two. But you can make out what sort of a guy he is. So I enjoy those interactions. I talk to them about safety. I talk to them about why they've joined me, why they should make their businesses safer. Talk to them about family. So those sort of things happen. So those are the activities that I do enjoy actually continuing to carry on in the business. But managing the manpower still has several challenges, and is, I would say, still a key part of transportation businesses in India.
Byram, do you think the road transport industry needs a uniform policy? Because currently we are seeing that everything is scattered all over the place. There is no uniform policy across the nation, across the industry. Do you think that is required?
Absolutely, and I think the dissemination of information also is patchy at times. Last week I had a very large OEM for trailer fifth wheel couplings contacting me and taking my views on interchangeability of tractor trailers. And most of us have worked in an environment where a prime mover was attached to one trailer, both with the same registration number, and they're married to each other right through their operating life. But we moved it on to, we have a client who started off with interchangeability among his own assets. And then we were told reliably that notifications have been passed by the government and the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways permitting seamless interchangeability between even distinct owners of assets. So while the prime mover may be owned by A, the trailer is owned by B, and you can still hook and unhook them and ply them. However, there is no clarity on the highways. I mean, we didn't have too many negative experiences, but when somebody as significant as this OEM should contact me and ask me about this, or just talk to me about this, I was surprised to see the lack of information penetration that is still taking place in our country. So it's still very, very arbitrary in terms of what everyone's understanding of a simple thing like interchangeability of tractor, which I think is a huge move towards efficiency for the future. So definitely everything coming together and having it very clearly in black and white that this is what you can do and what you can't do. Even the 5% leeway that they give on registered laden weight when they weigh trucks at state borders, for example. It's all a little gray. People are not very, very clear. They can't come out with a document and show it to the officer that, listen, this is a truck with a RLW of 35 tons, and hence I'm allowed 36.7 tons or whatever the 5% excess may be on that weight. And you should not be fining me because I've got 200 kilos of tarpaulins and I've got 400 liters of fuel, and this is why the weight is up. And it's not always possible to fine tune the cargo weight down to that level. But this is often misused. It's often unclear. And then you go into facilitation, negotiation, and goes down a different path, which is where so much of the cost of logistics goes away and is drained away in India. So yes, bringing it all together and laying this down, like a clear menu card of the do's and don'ts, which are authorized, signed off on by a senior officer, maybe the ministry, and you can put it in the face of an officer who stops your truck on the highway. That's not there, but maybe there are reasons why it's not there. But as a whole, the industry needs to come together. I've always had strong views on simple things like this great concept of high cube containers. Very often our client doesn't know what high cube is, and there is no definition of high cube. We do know that this is the sort of legal limits of the height of a truck, but the transporters have gone a step further, not realizing that they are shooting themselves in the foot by taking more and more cargo into their trucks, because that's bringing down the per unit cost to the client, and he's then not going to be bothered about how the transporter is going to bleed. Whereas if we had all said, no, this is what it's going to cost and this is all we will carry, eventually the industry would have to pay for that sort of volume. But by carrying more, and we feel that, oh, you're making more per trip, you're actually bringing down the unit cost of the cargo over time. And it's detrimental to the industry itself rather than advantageous. But I don't think that's been fully understood by the stakeholders, which is the transporters. So there's no clarity on a lot of things. This high cube thing has been misused. Many of the corporates are riding the wave till it lasts, until it gets very, very strongly mandated and implemented. But till then, those who don't have that format of vehicle might be at a significant disadvantage to others.
Byram, I know how passionate you are about vehicles. How much have vehicles improved over the years?
You can't really compare them now. It's not the same. I mean, they just call trucks, but they were called trucks then, they're called trucks now, but it's apples and oranges. They're completely different vehicles. Whether it be, I think the single biggest, I'd say the three biggest improvements that I've seen over the more than 30 years that I've been in a transport business is on power, on safety, and on reliability. Trucks have become far more robust and reliable. They become far more powerful, and they're far safer. And even with things like, I remember a client, a multinational, come in years ago, and this is when I started work with that multinational company, and they said, so this Britisher came in, he was part of the parent company, came into India, and we went down to the Wadala truck terminal, and one of our trucks was there, and he said, oh, I'd like to see the trucks. And so he says, he asks the India guy from the same company that where's the seat belt, and then he looks in and says, wait a minute, there's no seat here, let alone a seat belt. And this is what the trucks were then, I mean, with all respect to the Ashok Leylands and Tatas of the world then, they supplied trucks to us with a seat made out of angles and channels. And the poor driver would be driving this chassis all the way down from Chennai to Bombay or Jamshedpur to Bombay to deliver it to the customer. And then you'd fabricate your own seat. So we moved away from fabricating cabins because we did see the advantage of OEM built cabins. There's a lot of engineering that goes into it. They may not look as great as some of the personalized trucks that you see in truck centers like Kolhapur or Namakkal or maybe Indore or up north, but they're a lot safer. I mean, there has been some thought that goes into it. There has been some engineering that's gone into it. So on the safety front, on the ergonomics, trucks are much easier to drive now. Power steering, I mean, trucks have already moved, OEMs have already moved into semi-automatic gearboxes, so there's a lot less fatigue on the drivers, better brakes, I think air suspended seats, doors that don't have to slide open. And I mean, yesterday I was driving down from somewhere in Gujarat down to Bombay, and there was this guy who was in front of me holding up the road, but every now and then his door would keep opening 45 degrees, and I think he was trying to let air in because the poor guy, and then when we passed him, we saw he wasn't wearing any pants. He was in his undies driving the truck. Yeah, so obviously the poor guy was suffering in the heat, and he was trying to keep himself cool by periodically opening the door. Now, I was telling my co-passengers what a risk it is, because half his attention is on driving with one hand while he holds the door open with the other hand. There was nobody else in the truck with him. So that's the level of crudeness that existed in trucks back then, and it's moved away from that. You have better lights, definitely better tires, and of course more powerful engines. So there was always the point of view or the thought that, why do you need more power? Where are the roads to drive faster on? But it's not only about driving faster. Power doesn't only translate to a high top speed. It translates to how fast you can pass an obstacle. Each time you slow down for an obstacle, how long it takes you to again reach your cruising speed. You might be driving at 60 kilometers an hour and you drop down to 30 kilometers an hour because you see an obstacle. But how long does it take a truck with 180 horsepower to go back to 60 kilometers an hour as compared to a truck with 280 horsepower going back to 60 kilometers an hour? So these are aspects that will add to efficiency, will make the road safer. It will permit better overtaking maneuvers. It will permit a whole lot of other improvements. And of course, fuel efficiency hasn't moved in that, exponentially with power. Definitely not. I think the trucks are more fuel efficient today than they probably were back then. So today you can drive a 450 horsepower truck, which still can deliver 4 kilometers a liter or 3.5 kilometers a liter, which is a magic number back then. Of course, we look very closely at these numbers now because of the price of fuel, which we tended to ignore, because I remember back in the late 80s when I started business, diesel was probably cost us about 8 or 9 rupees a liter, and it's 10 times that 30 years down the line. So it wasn't a significant factor in the overall cost as it is today. It's more than.
Do you feel sometimes that safety hasn't been given as much attention or prominence as it deserves? Do we need to up that?
100%, yes.
You have been pushing for this really hard.
It's still a question of economics over the value they give to safety. I mean, is it making sense to spend that much money on safety? Is it making sense to implement, for example, a night driving ban? Okay, many of the large lubricants companies and oil companies that operate in India, because of the sheer challenges of running in India and the challenges that the environment throws at us, mandate a night driving ban. So you must have heard this several times, but many operators do not ply their trucks between, let's say, 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. simply because global statistics show that 80% of severe accidents take place between midnight and 5 a.m. So how do you reduce 80% of the risk of your business? Just keep the trucks off the road.
क्या आप जानते हैं एक ट्रक ओनर के लिए सबसे मुश्किल काम क्या होता है? अपने ट्रक के लिए रिटर्न लोड खोजना।
पर अब ट्रैकेट ट्रांसपोर्ट मार्केट ने इसे आसान कर दिया है।
वो कैसे?
ट्रांसपोर्ट मार्केट टाइम पर ट्रैकेट ऐप में आए हुए लोड पर अपना बेस्ट रेट भेजें, माल की डिलीवरी की डेट और टाइम सिलेक्ट करें और सबमिट कर दें, और ऑर्डर कंफर्म होने पर व्हीकल असाइन करें। है ना आसान? तो देर किस बात की? प्ले स्टोर ऐप पर टाइप करें TRAKET ट्रैकेट और डाउनलोड करें ट्रैकेट ऐप।
Welcome back to Trans India. Real people, real emotions. We are in conversation with the second generation at BD Dhalla Transport, Byram Dhalla. So, Byram, how safely is safety in trucks taken in India? What needs to be done? How can we improve on this?
Well, until it's mandated, I don't believe that the OEMs really focus too much on it. So when ABS brakes, for example, was mandated 4 or 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago now, 2017 I think it was mandated. Until then it was an optional feature. Some operators did choose to ask. I do remember that with one of the OEMs which we were using back in 2014-15, they had to create a product code for trucks with ABS brakes, or bipolar wiring, or there was some electrical features that we asked for. So these were not standard fitments that were available kind of off the shelf with most of the OEMs, and they were on demand kind of products or features that were being asked for by a few transporters such as us, or where our clients mandated it. So until it's pretty much pushed onto you, I don't believe it was it was a focus area either for the OEMs or even for the road users, as in the transporters. So the trucks today do have a higher level of safety, partly because it's moving more and more towards the direction of OEM built cabins, which I do think enhances the safety of the occupants of the truck. Things like even simple ergonomics, better visibility so that they can see road users, they can see what's going on. And now there are a lot of features that are coming in which is making the operation safer. Aside of the sheer telematics, which tells the owner or tells a remote operator on about the driving habits of the driver, factors like overspeeding, it may be overspeeding, rapid acceleration, harsh braking, continuous driving, drowsiness alerts, all these factors which can be now easily monitored remotely, and IT will throw out exception reports or violations of these. This makes the business a lot safer, and I think more and more of us will move in that direction, especially when we see that the industry is moving into organized players and they are seeing the value of these features. Trucks are getting more expensive for sure, and many of them come mandated with these features. So it's not negotiable that you don't want ABS brakes on your trucks, or you don't want a certain feature that might enhance road safety. So there are these technological improvements that are happening. Of course, it has to be driven by either the owner of the vehicle and understood and appreciated with the drivers. We have seen many times over the years, we recently deployed or rather installed pretty high-tech AI-enabled cameras on our trucks. Now these cameras face into the cabin as well as forward front-facing, and we had a lot of apprehension just prior to the installation of this, which took place about 6 months ago, that there would be resistance from the drivers because they might view it as an invasion of their privacy. We were happy to see over time that not only the rate of violations dropped dramatically when they were constantly interacted with. So it's a lot of not just putting it in and letting it run on its own, because invariably that will not work. It's the situation like stopping at a traffic light when no one's watching. So it's when you're being watched that you tend to adhere to the rules. I mean, that's the psychology, at least in our country, among drivers. So we have a team of people in our business who drive this quite strongly. I mean, it's obviously top-down driven by the senior management or the ownership of the company, but the people who implement it constantly interacting with the drivers, and they are seeing that we're not here to injure ourselves or lose our lives at the wheel. We want to go back home. We've come from remote parts of the country to work for this guy here who's sitting out of, in our case, Bombay. But we want to go back home and share the fruits of our effort and our labor. So we want to do our business in a safe way. So we've seen a dramatic drop in the use of, for example, cell phones. Initially, prior to the camera's installation, I'm guessing that the violation rate or the use of cell phones was much higher than it is subsequently. And it's not so much of a deterrent, but more of an understanding of the benefits of being operating in a safe manner that they're beginning to appreciate. So if it's driven, mated to technology, and it's pushed, explained, it will eventually percolate down. And when they see the benefit of it, I often talk to taxi drivers in the city, as in when I do get a chance to use a cab or need to use a cab, and you often see that the seatbelt has been tied up so that it does not really stretch across their body, and they give excuses. They give reasons, I should say, to be fair to them, that hum to thak jate hain din bhar chala ke, and with the belt it's obtrusive or it's uncomfortable. But then I talk to them and tell them, across the world, in every single geographical area or every weather climatic condition, drivers are using this all the time. When they are at the wheel, they put it on before they start the engine, and they take it off after they shut off the engine. Why does it have to be? I said, do you realize you're doing this and you're putting yourself at a risk? I said, see, talk to them about it. And often it rings a bell in their minds, and they appreciate that kind of conversation, rather than look at, okay, why the hell is my passenger trying to sermonize me? So I think that whole effort will, but we still see blatant safety violations on our roads, which is very upsetting to see. I do believe that the controlled access highways will reduce this gross misuse of our highways, of the roads that we see currently. I'm happy to see that we'll be having a controlled access road connecting Mumbai to Delhi or Mumbai to Nagpur, eventually Mumbai to Bangalore for that matter. All these main corridors will be on controlled access roads, so you won't have other random road users coming across. It'll incredibly improve the safety stats of I'm hoping to see this happening. Of course, then there'll be a different set of challenges in terms of overspeeding or drowsiness or drivers falling asleep at the wheel. We did try the Samruddhi Express Highway a few months ago when it was opened on that stretch between Nagpur and Shirdi. And the initial response of the drivers who have never driven on a road which has hundreds of kilometers of uninterrupted sort of driving, says that, neend aati hai. And let's give it some more time till more infrastructure has developed on that road, so that we can then take frequent breaks at reasonably good facilities and thereby make it a safe journey. So we moved the trips back onto the old road for now, but we're definitely looking at using those roads. And we do hope that all the technology, all the safety is there in place. Drivers understand and appreciate the importance of staying in the slow lanes and allowing faster traffic to move, because there is no risk of driving in the slow lane, which they face on driving on our highways today, with random things coming onto the road users, bikes, walking, people driving the wrong direction. You see it blatantly all the time, everywhere, and you can't sometimes blame the truck driver, because he's just worried. He's not worried about you yelling at him or gesturing at him, but he's worried about the safety of his truck and just getting to his destination safely. They're coming down very heavily with fines. We are already seeing a lot of fines for driving the wrong lane or incorrect overtaking and such like that. On the other hand, some of the classic so-called safety features or requirements of trucking need to be given a hard relook at. The cleaner rule, for example, or driver assistant rule. Most of us are struggling with having drivers to man our trucks, especially during the summer months when much of our population migrates back to the villages for weddings, for their fields, for their work in the fields, for planting seeds in the fields for their next crop, taking care of their farmlands and so on. When we're having trouble with getting a driver, we know that there is no availability of cleaners, and often the drivers use this as a tool to goof off or say, "Ke bhai, cleaner nahi hai, main kya karu," sort of thing. But we're still getting fined heavily for that. In the city of Bombay, I think there's a fine of maybe 1,500 rupees for no cleaner. And these are things that the ministries need to look at and understand how much value does that little chap sitting on the left, invariably asleep, or in the older trucks, he'd be half out of the truck sitting what value is he adding to the safety of the movement of the truck, or bringing to it? Across the globe, nobody has a second driver. I mean, we're doing, whether it be economies or transport economies like China, which also has similar distances as India. I'm not talking of Europe and maybe some parts of the Middle East, but countries like Australia, China, the United States, which have large trucking distances, they drive single driver most of the time. And there is no law mandating that they be accompanied, but the single driver has to operate within certain norms that have been laid down, which are typically adhered to because the fines are very, very high. So the deterrents are high, the entry barriers are high to trying to violate those sort of norms, and these are things that need to be relooked at rapidly, to clean up the challenges that we face, which are slowing it down. The other important, but on a side note and not safety related, which I feel severely detract from the efficiency of logistics in our country, is what happens at the other ends, at the two ends of the trip. While we might have a fabulous road connecting Nagpur to Bombay, which has dropped the distance by 100 kilometers and with a cruising speed of 80 or 90 kilometers for our trucks as well, and you could do this conceivably in 10 hours, but then you come down to Bombay and you spend 2 days waiting for the truck to unload for various reasons. It could be a random holiday, it could be a local issue, it could be there is no space in the warehouses. That's the second point that needs to be looked at very, very strongly to keep our businesses sustainable, because I'm just hazarding a guess, you'd need 30 or 40% less trucks on the road to do the same amount of business as is being currently done, because so many of our trucks are just mobile warehouses, waiting outside. There are clients who are blatantly using this all the time as and delaying the unloading of the truck at faulty halting charges. I'm told that there are agencies that are now going to rate corporates on the basis of their efficiency of handling go downs and warehouses, which is a great move, and will give them an A, B, and C rating, and a C rating will make it more difficult for them to find transporters, or when they float bids, you could go and see what their business is actually like by visiting a website or a rating website that companies may have to adhere to or subscribe to and show their efficiencies.
Byram, there is this new safety feature, ADAS, which is, gaining popularity slowly but steadily. We've also heard that you are pushing the OEMs to get this into trucks. How will this really help?
Absolutely right. So ADAS is any advanced driver assistance system or advanced driver aid system. I'm not sure which word it is that the acronym stands for, but anything that that replaces tech to an extent to minimize human error is something that has immeasurable value. As they always say, you will never know the number of lives you save on the road. You will only count the number of lives that are lost on the road. Sadly, that's a reality. But if you drive safely, if you have a safe business, a safe operation, you will be saving lives. And we all know the awful statistics that sadly India does have in terms of road fatalities. And of course, we have a lot of reports published on that topic, which say that out of the 1.5 lakh fatalities a year that Indian roads see, so many more lives are destroyed because they lose a bread earner, or so that could be 1 million lives in a year which are affected because of incidents that could have been conceivably controlled. So I'm a huge fan of using any technology that's available, whether it be passive technology or active technology, or features such as ADAS, for example, or adaptive braking. It's a feature I've used on cars when I've driven abroad, which is a fabulous feature where the car assesses the distance that you are following a vehicle in front, the distance to the vehicle you're following in front of you, and can apply brakes on its own should you be going too fast or too near. So should you fall asleep, lose concentration, it could save you from a potential rear-end accident. A lot of the incidents we hear about are of people hitting stationary vehicles. That's a matter of education, getting them off. Of course, it's a function of also suitable and good parking spaces on these increasingly long stretches that are now being built in India, where drivers are going to be driving 1,300 kilometers or 1,400 kilometers from Delhi to Bombay on a controlled access road. So they want good stops, maybe every 12 kilometers, 15 kilometers. The typical distance in which a driver could be losing concentration after maybe a heavy meal, or he's not rested enough. But if he sees a suitable parking spot, he pulls off and gets off the road. So he's no longer a risk to anyone else who's using that road. But we don't have that facility as of now. People are randomly parked and they're not being fined for that sort of sloppy parking, aside of things like driving down the wrong side. So features like any driver assist systems which can minimize this risk by the use of technology. And I do believe this technology is only going to get less expensive over time. And it's not going to be a huge challenge. It's going to be a replication of maybe what expenses many of the OEMs took when they came in with ABS brakes, for example, EBD and ABS and anti-roll devices and such as stability programs on the trucks. So this is just one of the other features that could dramatically, and I've been a huge advocate and I've been pushing very hard with OEMs and people who have access to high up in some of the OEMs across the world actually, to look at bringing these features into India. And I have harsh conversations, if I may say so, with many of these people, and saying that lives of Indian drivers is as valuable as the lives of a European or an American or a German driver for that matter. And they do see that, and they said that this is around the corner. I'll be happy to see these offerings coming in the next few months. And then, of course, it's a question of what the vendor himself, the transporter himself, sees as a fair point to place value on that feature. It'll make our trucks safer. It'll make it safer for road users. These sort of things will add a lot of value, I do believe, and which take it out of the hands of the operator of the truck.
Friends, with transporters like Byram and others pushing for safety features like ADAS and others, will we see more trucks with these enhanced safety features, and will the cost eventually come down, making it more affordable and acceptable? That only time will tell. However, we are happy that some transporters are taking road safety very seriously and don't mind spending extra to make sure that their truck, the driver and the consignment remain safe. It was indeed a delight talking to Byram, and we are happy that the next gen at BD Dhalla Transport is already in the business. Jehan is the third generation in the company, and we hope that with Jehan handling a part of the business, Byram will have more time for his road trips across the globe. We will be back again next week with yet another interaction and inspiring journey. You are watching Trans India, real people, real emotions. Until next week, stay safe, drive safe, Jai Hind.
We do have a mindset that we've always been using since decades. And that's, let's say, the heart of Volvo. That's care, it's credibility, and evolution. People need to recognize themselves, but they also need to have this wow feeling. The Volvo emblem and the V-shaped lights create a strong identity even from a distance. The front of the coach has a friendly and confident face and excellent aerodynamics. it's boring or bad only if it loses its relevance. But as long as you keep to these values of Volvo, we are sure that we will not be in that position.
क्या आप जानते हैं एक ट्रक ओनर के लिए सबसे मुश्किल काम क्या होता है? अपने ट्रक के लिए रिटर्न लोड खोजना।
पर अब ट्रैकेट ट्रांसपोर्ट मार्केट ने इसे आसान कर दिया है।
वो कैसे?
ट्रांसपोर्ट मार्केट टाइम पर ट्रैकेट ऐप में आए हुए लोड पर अपना बेस्ट रेट भेजें, माल की डिलीवरी की डेट और टाइम सिलेक्ट करें और सबमिट कर दें, और ऑर्डर कंफर्म होने पर व्हीकल असाइन करें। है ना आसान? तो देर किस बात की? प्ले स्टोर ऐप पर टाइप करें TRAKET ट्रैकेट और डाउनलोड करें ट्रैकेट ऐप।